Hello everybody, my name is Ronnie Chang,
Hi, my name is Ashley Dang.
Hi, my name is Tyler Doe.
Hello, my name is Giselle and I'm part of the Bulgarian Method group.
and today we will be doing a presentation on the Bulgarian Method. So to start off, who developed the Bulgarian Method and who made it famous? Here on the right hand side we have a man by the name of Ivan Abagiev. And Ivan Abagiev was the national strength coach for the Bulgarian weightlifting team. He had been the assistant coach for many years and was eventually promoted to head coach in the year 1969. During this time in the 1960s, the USSR was the most dominant country when it came to weightlifting. All the countries that pertain to the USSR all had the same style of training, which consisted of training 3 to 4 days a week and would only work towards reaching 100% max rep as competition got closer. So Abagiev did not agree with this system of training and decided to implement his own method on his team, which eventually led to 20 years of success. He believed that training heavy was the most effective way to improve competitive weightlifting performance. His approach was to train 2 to 3 times a day instead of 3 to 4 days a week. They would only push for 100% max rep, and every session was essentially a mock competition. The advantages of mimicking competition was not only physical, but psychological as well. Abagiev will closely monitor every athlete during every training session to be able to critique them, but also to motivate them. He wanted to make sure that they weren't slacking off and they were actually giving, their best efforts when trying to push for 100% max reps. Over the course of his career as head coach, he produced a total of 12 Olympic champions, 57 world champions, and 64 European champions. It is also very important to note that in the year 1985, he led Bulgaria to defeat the USSR at the World Championships. With all that said, what is the primary goal of the Bulgarian Method? The primary goal of the Bulgarian Method is to be able to generate the highest peak power in time for competition through very high intense and low volume training. The program is designed to simulate competition where athletes would train within their 90 to 100% 1 rep max range.
Olympic lifting is about lifting the heaviest weight once. So that's what Abagiev's lifters did every day at every workout. His training method was renowned for its high specificity, high frequency, and high intensity. The training revolves around competitive lifts, which includes a snatch, clean and jerk, and the front squat. The logic of his training was that if you subject the body to a constant load of heavy stress composed of steady, repetitive, explosive movements, it would adjust to this load and adapt to handle the increased stress. To ensure maximum training quality, he went through with an extreme style of training. They trained 2 to 3 times a day, 6 days a week, with Sunday being their rest days. Most sets were done for 1 or 2 repetitions, and their load would be 95 to 100% of their 1 repetition maximum. Each lift would be worked for about 30 minutes. They would work up to at most 6 maximum single lifts before taking a 30-minute break, and then training the next lift. For example, they would snatch for 30 to 40 minutes, then rest for 20 to 30 minutes, clean and jerk for 30 minutes, rest for 20 minutes, and front squat for 20 to 30 minutes. That was one session, and they would do this 2 to 3 times a day. So the question is, how can they endure all that training? To help aid in recovery, they incorporated water therapy, whirlpools, massage, proper diet, adequate sleep, and not to mention performance-enhancing drugs. Another thing to note is that instead of having light days, Bulgarian lifters max out on the power snatch instead of the full snatch. And they max out on the power clean instead of the clean and jerk. Remember, this was designed for elite male athletes and is best for Olympic weightlifters. It takes about 4 to 5 months to adapt to this program and another 8 to 10 years minimum to reach some form of international success. Another thing to take into consideration is to make sure you are experienced, because this program is done with heavy lifts that are done frequently, 2 to 3 times a day, and about 6 days a week. It is done explosively and intensely. You need years and years of experience of doing correct and consistent form. You also need the drive and intensity to follow through with this program. So that's why you should consider having a coach who has experience in this type of training. And lastly, you want to slowly progress your way into it. To follow the program successfully, the intensity in each session must be kept high and the repetitions must be kept to 1 or 2. The other factor is that you need to take 30-minute rest periods between exercises. A lot of the European weightlifters would take a cigarette break in between exercises, but it is definitely recommended that you just remove yourself from the weight room and find a quiet place to relax. The biggest mistake people make when they begin the Bulgarian system of training is starting the program too heavy, so the body never has a chance to adapt. If you want to experience the Bulgarian system of training, it is recommended that you begin with the following progression. First, you want to train heavy every workout 3 times per week. And then you want to add 1 training day at a time until you are training 6 days per week. Secondly, you want to add 2 morning sessions a week of just front squats. And then you want to increase this 1 day at a time until you're comfortable training 2 sessions per day, 5 days per week, and 1 session on Saturday. Once you reach this stage, add a light warm-up day on Sunday. A sample program would look like this. From 11 a.m. to 11:45, you do the front squat. And then from 11:45 to 12:15, you take a break. And then from 12:15 p.m. to 1, you do the snatch. And then from 1 to 1:30, you take another break. Lastly, from 1:30 to 2, you do the clean and jerk. So this is a Bulgarian training system. You snatch, clean and jerk, and front squat every day. It takes a long time to adapt and to perfect. It takes discipline, determination, and patience.
Okay, now we'll be talking about the studies that are for the Bulgarian method. The first one will be comparisons between twice daily and once daily training sessions in male weightlifters. In this study, they had 2 groups of 5 male weightlifters. The study was about 3 weeks long. One group did 1 session for 4 days, and one group did 2 sessions for 4 days a week. Now let's talk about the way that they measured these 4 things that I had just mentioned. So for the first one, we'll be talking about muscular strength. The way that they measured this is by doing isometric knee extensions, and they assessed the quadriceps for that and the surface of the EMG. For the muscle power, they determined this by counter movements, and they decided to do this by having every man do vertical jumps with a contact mat, and that's how they assessed how much muscular power they had. They had at least 2 to 3 minutes to warm up with calisthenics, and then followed by some warm-up jumps. For this one, they had to have their hands on their hips, maintain an upright posture, and try to obtain optimal height. And the jumps were separated by at least 45 seconds. So after one jump, they had a break of 45 seconds, and then they got to do the other jumps. And like I said, the jumps were calculated by the contact mat. As for muscle hypertrophy, they focused on the rectus femoris by measuring the cross-sectional area using a diagnostic ultrasound. In the first study, they talked about how splitting a workout into 2 sessions can allow the intensity of the session to stay high while performing at the same volume. That would be a really good advantage for the group that did 2 sessions, whereas if they did it in 1 session, they wouldn't have the same intensity throughout the whole workout. The intensity might go down because of how big the volume is. Having 2 sessions per day can increase the neuromuscular efficiency and can help decrease overtraining. Okay, this can also maximize energy utilization and reduce fatigue. And looking at the whole study, there were some increases in their strength, hypertrophy, and power, as well as neuromuscular activation. If we look at the tables that I had set on this slide, the first one will be all the measurements that they had pre and post study, and the second table will be looking over the exercises that they had to do. As a result, and in the conclusion, they talked about how twice daily training sessions were more conductive in muscle hypertrophy and more effective in neuromuscular training stimulus. And now looking on to the second study that I had researched on. This one is called The Influence of Resistance Training Frequency on Muscular Adaptations in Well-Trained Men. In this study, 20 men were split into 2 groups, and this one was slightly longer. It was an 8-week study. One of the groups did a split training, and the other one did full body training 3 days every week. What I mean by split training, they split the days by muscles, so they would do upper body one day, lower body another day, and they could have switched that up like back, quads, hamstrings, and so on. When I looked at this study, they were talking about how frequency was pertaining to the number of exercise performed in each session. And they were talking about how power lifters like to do more full body routines, and that's why they don't get fatigued as fast, and they have a little bit more of an advantage when it comes to increasing strength, power, etc. As for the resistance training procedures, they did the exact same load and like aligned above in the table that I have for you on the slide. Everyone did 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps per exercise. The measurements were taken very similarly to the other one. They assessed muscle thickness and muscle strength, and they did this by doing 1 rep max testing with the back squat and a bench press. As for the results, they only had 19 subjects left instead of 20 because 1 dropped, unfortunately. As for the results in muscle thickness, both groups did increase in muscle thickness, but the one that takes the cake is definitely the total body workout, and they had a significant increase in forearm specifically, and tricep thickness, as well as the vastus lateralis. As for the max strength, there were significant advances, but there was not much difference between both of the groups. Looking at the discussion, there was more of an advantage with the total body exercises. They definitely had more increases within the topics that I just mentioned, like muscle thickness and strength. These studies really help us understand that the Bulgarian method can be a very positive thing when it comes to splitting the sessions and working on multiple things. We focus more on like Olympic lifts, and it's not so straining as powerlifting, and therefore they could do a lot more of it rather than doing split days like I mentioned in the second study. The full body definitely had a lot more of an advantage because they didn't have so much strain on their body when they were doing as if they were doing 1 session. But yeah, on to the next subject.
These are the benefits that the Bulgarian method offers. The first being that the Bulgarian method of training is very sport specific. The adaptations that are made during training are directly applicable to competition. The Bulgarian method is able to produce the desired effect of developing peak power in time for competition. This is due to the fact that athletes are literally training using competitive lifts exclusively, such as the snatch and the clean and jerk. Even the accessories that the athletes performed were modified versions of the Olympic lifts, such as power cleans and just power snatches.
Second benefit of training underneath the Bulgarian method is that the training is designed to simulate the same intensity that athletes would face in competition. The Bulgarian method's dogma is eat, sleep, and lift heavy. Athletes would lift at near maximal effort almost every training session multiple times a day. The idea behind this is that if you can lift weight in training, you can lift it in competition. This would prime their bodies and their mental state to be ready for weight that they would handle in competition. Mental toughness is something that is developed when training under the Bulgarian method. Abajev was a very no-nonsense kind of person. He expected his athletes to come in every day and lift heavy multiple times a day. If you couldn't handle that, then you could leave. Anyone that has performed a 1 rep max before knows that it completely fries you. That being said, it would take a person with extreme determination and perseverance to be able to handle that kind of grueling training every day, 6 times a week. Another benefit of the Bulgarian method is how simple it is to program. In other methods of periodization, you have several things to consider when planning training sessions, such as volume, exercise selection, intensity, training splits, and the list goes on. But with the Bulgarian method, planning training sessions are very simple. You lift heavy, you rest, you lift heavy again, rinse and repeat. The fact that you only perform a small amount of lifts at the same intensity with the same rep ranges makes it simple to know what athletes are going to be doing every single day. Although Abajev and the Bulgarian method produce great results, there are some criticisms and limitations that the Bulgarian method faces. The first being that the Bulgarian method has an extremely low variation. As stated previously, athletes will perform the same 3 lifts within the same rep ranges at the same intensity multiple times a day, almost every day. This is completely different from most periodizations, which are like a buffet, with an almost endless selection of exercises, rep ranges, and intensity. You can pick and choose to suit whatever goals you're trying to achieve. The Bulgarian method is similar to the stereotypical bodybuilder's meal prep. It's the same thing every day, chicken, rice, and broccoli. For the Bulgarian method, it's the same thing every day, clean and jerks, snatches, and front squats. This low amount of variation would leave most people being bored doing the same thing every day. The sports specificity of the Bulgarian method is very beneficial when applied to Olympic lifting, but it is also a limiting factor. Because the Bulgarian method is designed specifically for Olympic lifting, this makes it impossible to apply to any team sports and even other forms of weightlifting such as powerlifting or bodybuilding. Major criticism that the Bulgarian method faces is the fact that there is an increased risk of injury. Performing a lift at near maximal effort with perfect technique is extremely difficult, and on top of that, athletes are doing this multiple times a day. This increases the risk of injury by a significant amount. Overuse injuries are also a risk when using the Bulgarian method because of the extreme load that is placed on the body at a very frequent rate. Athletes only have a couple of hours in between training sessions, and it may not be enough for them to recover completely. One of the limiting factors of the Bulgarian method is a reliance on an observant coach. The coach must be monitoring every set that the lifters perform to either correct form or to give athletes the mental push to persevere through the training. Without a coach, it is extremely difficult to use the Bulgarian method. Another limiting factor of this periodization is the fact that it is designed with the assumption that the athlete has a strong pre-existing base in Olympic lifting. You have to know what you're doing in order to use this program effectively. A novice lifter will not be able to learn the techniques of Olympic lifting while trying to apply this program, because doing it so can result in serious injury. Another limitation is that this program is not designed for the general population. Due to its extremely time-consuming nature, this program is only applicable to someone that does Olympic lifting professionally. Someone who does Olympic lifting professionally has the time to train multiple times a day and also has the time to rest in between training sessions. Due to the frequency of training sessions and the amount of time needed for rest and eating, it is impossible to apply this type of periodization to a person that works a normal 9 to 5 job.